Good evening. I am Regina Jackson, Chair of the Oakland Police Commission. I am joined by fellow Commissioners Taifara Malele and Commissioner Marsha Peterson, and we'd like to welcome everyone to the Police Commission's Inspector General Candidate Forum. The Commission, through its ad hoc selection committee, reviewed and analyzed all of the applications it received for this position. The committee conducted multiple rounds of interviews and has determined that these three finalists, who you will meet this evening, are the very best of that applicant pool. We will ask a series of questions of the finalists to allow the public to get to know them better and to highlight each candidate's thoughts, experience, and readiness for the position. Should any member of the public desire more information about these candidates, we will have posted their bio information on the Police Commission webpage by the end of this week, along with their answers to specific interview questions, maybe not. Sorry about that. Also, should one desire to provide commentary or endorsements about any individual candidate after this evening, you may do so in the public comment for tomorrow's Police Commission meeting. I want to again thank the public for its attendance and engagement in this process. And without further ado, I would like to ask Commissioners Malele and Peterson to introduce our three finalists.
Thank you, Chair. I am Commissioner Taifara Malele. We are so thrilled with our finalists and are excited to introduce you, starting with Miss Rebecca Johnson. Ms. Johnson hails from right here in Oakland, a 14-year veteran with the IG's office at OPD, where she served as an integral part of OPD's transformation and compliance as part of the negotiated settlement agreement. Prior to that, Ms. Johnson spent 18 years at the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, AKA Amtrak. She has kept it local. She attended and graduated from McClymonds High School, received her BA from the University of California at Berkeley, and a master's degree in public administration. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Mcmurray, another candidate with strong Oakland roots. Mr. Muir is a supervising investigator at New York City's Civilian Complaint Review Board. He has dedicated his career to investigating allegations of homicide, sexual misconduct, and excessive force by law enforcement personnel. Outside of the CCRB, he advises presidential, congressional, and local political campaigns on policing policy. He holds a BA from Oberlin College in Politics and African Studies, where his studies focused on the history of the Oakland Police Department.
Thank you.
And last but by no means least, we welcome Ms. Michelle Phillips, the Deputy Inspector General of Investigations for the City of Baltimore. Prior to working for the City of Baltimore, Ms. Phillips held a management position at the National Police Foundation, where she managed large-scale community policing projects. Ms. Phillips earned her degree in criminal justice from Coppin State University and her master's in criminal justice from the University of Baltimore. Welcome, Ms. Phillips, and thank you, candidates, for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much.
I would like to go back as I overlooked a few logistics and expectations. We thank the members of the Oakland communities and anyone else tuning in or watching the recording from around the Bay. This is a critical new position for Oakland's public safety landscape, so thank you for your continued involvement and for joining tonight. We will not have public comment this evening, and since we have a Police Commission meeting tomorrow starting at 5:30, we ask that members of the viewing public join us at tomorrow's meeting to share their thoughts during public comment. While we're covering logistics, let me tell you how well this evening is planned. We'll ask each of our candidates the same question and allow them 5 minutes for their response, and this will be timed. We will have time for 3 questions and then closing remarks. We have asked that the public weigh in with suggested questions. Our survey remained open for 2 weeks and was closed on Monday for review. Thank you to everyone that took the time to weigh in. We've considered your input and incorporated some of your sentiments and ideas. After this forum, here's what you can expect. We will cover the general progress of this ad hoc's efforts tonight and our commission meeting tomorrow. We will then work as an ad hoc to review and consolidate our notes, ready to present to the full commission for discussion sometime in November before making a final decision and offering the position. We hope you'll understand that while we continue pushing for ultimate transparency, as they address labor issues, some of these discussions must be held in closed session. However, we'll be sure to share out as much as possible. Now that we have that covered, we can go to our first question. And so now that we're all here, we're going to start in alphabetical order for now. And so Ms. Johnson will be first up. Ms. Johnson, what does a 21st century police force look like?
Okay, it's a force, actually one in which everyone benefits. It looks a lot like what OPD is trying to do right now with the negotiated settlement agreement. It's one in which the policing is considered lawful, definitely by, it has to be by the public. It has to be, it's one that in which is considered lawful, transparent, effective policing, also non-discriminatory. And so when we look at the charter that's been brought about to bring about this Inspector General's job, that's what the negotiated settlement agreement does. It brings about transparency. It has goals, right? Equity is one of them, transparency, training for police officers, accountability, and adequate supervision. So that's what it looks like. And you can see an example of that. And I'm speaking on the federal level. There's about 18,000 police departments across the country, but this is what the federal government is looking for. And you can see an example right now with Phoenix Police Department, August 5th, I think the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, they're gonna be looking at their practice and their patterns in practice, and they will, all those terms you'll see, that's what you're gonna be looking for: transparency, adequate supervision, and accountability. So for 21st century policing, this is what it looks like, and OPD is a model of what that looks like under the negotiated settlement agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. And so the same question is to you, Mr. Muir. What does a 21st century policing look like?
Thank you so much, Chair Jackson, and just thank you to the commissioners who've been involved in this process, and thank you to the people of Oakland who are tuning in now and who will tune in the future. When we look at what a 21st century police department looks like, we are now 21 years into that, and we can see that there's some major issues at play, highlighted by what happened, or what was most highlighted with the death of George Floyd, or the murder of George Floyd, and the protests that followed. And when we look at the negotiated settlement agreement in Oakland, I try to view that as the bare minimum is what a police department can be doing. And I think that members of the community will agree that there's concerns that at which time, at whatever point the police department is no longer under that consent decree, that it can easily drop back into the conditions that existed before. So what I want to talk about is the next 80 years. And I've got sort of 4 points that are most important to me. The first point is, I think, the elephant in the room in policing, which is gender. Across America, about 85% of police officers are men. And I think that if you were to look at any other industry and see that sort of disparity, you'd say that's pretty ridiculous. There's some major problems that come with that. I think that you've got, in the last 30, 40 years, more studies that have come out on the advantage of having women in policing, not just in specific parts of a police department, but across it. The benefits include that female officers are shown to use less force. They're shown to save cities money in civil suits as a consequence of that. And they're also, in many cases, I would argue, more competent in terms of investigating sexual violence and sex crimes in general. So point 2, decarceration. I think that it's got to be a premise of a 21st century police department that mass incarceration as it has existed is a bad thing. And that's something that police departments need to be saying up front when they talk to the communities and when they create their policing policies. The process of arresting somebody is traumatic on its face, but it also creates the reverberation that comes with incarceration. And I hope to see an Oakland Police Department that's committed to the policies that come with decarceration and shaping its own policies to avoid arrests and incarceration whenever possible. Point 3, violent crimes investigations. I would say that in the course of the broken windows era of policing, you've had an investment in proactive policing. That's officers out on the street going to find the criminals, so to speak. And I think as a consequence, you've had criminal investigations, the complex ones, neglected. You see complaints of that across the country. You see that clearance rates have not gone up. And I would hope that the Oakland Police Department is most interested going forward in a post-broken windows era in focusing strictly on violent crime as a #1 priority and in the investigations that hold violent people accountable for their actions. With that same principle of decarceration in mind, we need the important crimes to be focused on, the ones that do the most harm to the community. And point 3, I'll just say 911 response times are going to be something that's crucial to the future of a 21st century police department. You see that as a problem in Oakland. I know it well. I think for everyone who lives in town knows that. And we're going to be looking to change that nationally. It's something where Oakland lags. And I hope that the Inspector General's office could be involved in streamlining that process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Muir. And to you, Ms. Phillips, what does a 21st century police force look like? You are on mute.
A 21st century police department, in my opinion, looks like one that is extremely well-rounded. As we all know, the Oakland Police Department has been under the National Settlement Agreement. I think it's very, very important that a community approach, a holistic approach is important when we are talking about 21st policing. Primarily trust. We have to rebuild trust in the community, trust in the police department, as well as citizen trust. There has to be a partnership in order to show what that looks like, legitimacy within that, that milieu when it comes to individuals having interactions with police officers and police employees as a whole. 911 dispatchers as well. There has to be a sense of trust where individuals, citizens, community activists are comfortable with communicating with police officers. We have to make sure that there is policy and oversight, accountability in policy and oversight. OPD has to have a strong understanding of what that looks like, and there has to be equity in distribution when we're talking about 21st policing and the implementation of policies and oversight. Everybody has to be equally disciplined and equally praised in the same way. That needs to be communicated and communicated to the police officers, and the citizens need to be educated as well regarding that. We need to ensure that we're utilizing technology and social media in order to get the information out there as to what OPD is doing, what they're doing in the community, how collectively the Police Commission, the Inspector General, the Citizen Community Review Board, as well as OPD is working in partnership to communicate that information and to build a better, more transparent and accountable police department. We also have to ensure that we invest in our police officers. Do we want to maintain community engagement? Absolutely. But one way that we can also do that is by educating our police officers and letting them know that we not only care about the community, but we also care about them and their well-being. Being a police officer is an extremely difficult job. We need to ensure that they have the appropriate skill sets to utilize in de-escalation tactics. We need to ensure that they have a clear understanding as to how to communicate when they're encountering individuals that are of a protected class. We also need to ensure that they are educated into how to communicate with their superiors, as well as community leaders, nonprofit leaders, and community activists. We have to ensure as a holistic community and approach that everybody is communicating well. Everybody has a clear understanding as to what the mission is, and that our first priority is to maintain safety and security for Oakland Police Department, as well as the Oakland Police community and the Oakland citizens as well. We need to understand that that is very important. So we want to maintain that there is safety and security on the streets of Oakland, whether there's a mass demonstration, and we need to educate the citizens as to what that looks like. Communicate that on every facet, utilize community partnerships in the schools so that the young people understand and they know what 21st century policing looks like. And they also have a voice to show some ideas, share their interactions, and be a part of the change. Everybody, the citizens of Oakland, as well as the police officers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Phillips.
Yes, thank you. And actually, our next question, you're going to be the one to go first. Apologies for that. So what policies do you anticipate adopting to address and eradicate the department's role in racial profiling, implicit bias, and structural racism?
Am I going first, Rebecca, or is it Ms. Phillips?
I'm going first.
Ms.
but
Phillips.
Okay. So what policies that I would ensure that we go ahead and implement are what I was talking about previously. Implicit bias is something that is systemic. It's something that is a part of the police culture. That's something that needs to change. One way that we can change that is through education. So I would definitely look at different policies throughout the nation. And what we need to also include is that there is tons of federal technical assistance, the COPS program, IACP, National Police Foundation. There are tons of different areas, as well as scholars, criminologists, nonprofit community activists who can be a part of the solution in educating individuals. There are people who are systemically utilizing certain processes that they may not necessarily be aware that they're doing. We need to be accountable. We need accountability partners within OPD as well. If you see something, you say something. If somebody is talking to someone in a way that you know is not appropriate, then we need to make sure that there are policies in place that we hold each other accountable. Understand that public outcry is there. There also needs to be policies that show how we interact with citizens. We, as the Inspector General's office, need to ensure that those policies are adhered to. We need to understand that when there are high profile situations going on, there will be people out there trying to videotape and have, comments about it. As police officers, individuals need to maintain what they need to do, ensure that they don't get upset, de-escalate the situation. Those people need to be accountable. Officers need to be accountable and ensure that they need to understand that the policies that they have been taught, that they have said that they understand, that they need to adhere to. We all know that there are gender bias. The world is starting to evolve in a different way. There are streams of different individuals who self-identify in different ways. We need to educate our police officers as to how to communicate with those individuals, what that looks like, and hold them accountable. You don't want anybody to make a police officer feel uncomfortable. The citizens don't want to feel uncomfortable. They want to feel comfortable to talk to individuals, let them know that they have an issue, they have a problem, and seek guidance with OPD. We need stronger policies to ensure that those fundamental civil rights are not violated in any way, shape, form, or facet when interacting with OPD officers or anybody of the public. We have to make sure that we protect the community so that we get back to that trust and community policing in an appropriate and effective manner.
Thank you. Mr. Muir, same question for you. What policies do you anticipate adopting to to address and eradicate the department's role in racial profiling, implicit bias, and structural racism.
Thank you very much. What I want to begin just talking about in terms of the question itself is that a lot of times when we talk about policing and racism, we think about it in sort of a granular sense. And I think it's important to zoom out and say, okay, so law enforcement, right? That's a profession and it's a concept. But we also have fundamentally a group of people who are required to enforce a law that was based on the Constitution, which is founded with the pretense that men are the only people who should be equal in society, and that women and people of color are beneath them. And so we have a body of law that's based on that. We have a body of law around policing, much of which was written into law in the time around desegregation in the few years afterward. And I think a lot of time when we have a conversation about policing, we're like, well, the officers need to be less racist. And I think there needs to be a healthy conversation about the department's role in deciding which laws and how to enforce, which laws to enforce and how to enforce them, because that's the bigger question. We know that the same laws are not enforced in white communities as there are in Black communities. We know this as citizens of Oakland and citizens of the United States. So beginning with that, in terms of the policies themselves, I would say the first step for any inspector general is going to be talking to the stakeholders, right? There's a rich history in Oakland of police attempts at police oversight. There's an existing oversight body, and that's going to mean talking to Judge Orrick. That's going to mean talking to the counsel in the Delphine Allen case. That's going to be talking to academics, the department itself, the Coalition for Police Accountability, and community and government leaders across the board. I think what would be important to me would be speaking with officers directly whenever possible, because I'm certain that, knowing from my own job, that they'll have insights that are unique in that regard, and hopefully the Inspector General's office can draw that out as much as possible. So after talking to the stakeholders, I think we're going to need to immediately delve into, similar to the existing IG's office, do audits for racial disparities in policing, subdivide the different categories of policing, audit, and then take bold action where we find that those disparities exist. Three, and this is something that I'm very interested in, which is the forensic experiential trauma interviewing process. I've been trained in this process in New York City. It's something that's used with law enforcement across the country, specifically in terms of investigations into sex crimes is kind of how we frame it. However, this organization really focuses on limiting trauma in relationship to law enforcement. And I'm not talking about big interactions. I'm talking about little interactions. An interview about a crime, the organization of a room that a victim of a crime has to come into. They do a spectacular job at breaking down policing on a granular level to with the expectation that it's going to be a traumatic process. And I think that that's what this office would need to have an understanding of, and then bring them in as consultants to a certain extent and just say, how can we train the department to view policing through this lens? Because they're excellent law enforcement with federal and military experience. And I think they would be very useful. I encourage everyone who's watching to check them out online as well. Part 4, I've presented this to the commission. I have sort of a two-pronged vision for pilot programs. One would be limiting the minimum age for a member of OPD to 25 years old. I think there's a lot of brain science behind that, and I could foresee a lot of people in the community appreciating that. Pilot program 2, with less specificity, I think that we need to have a part of the department that actually reflects the gender breakdown of a normal profession as opposed to policing. So what exactly that number is, I think we need to take one part of the department and have it be 50-50 or more in terms of women to men ratio, and then study it and try to learn. This is an opportunity here in Oakland. We have a history of police violence, we have a history of crime, but at the same time, it means that we can be a model for how to get out of that situation. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muir. And Ms. Johnson, what policies do you anticipate adopting to address and eradicate the department's role in racial profiling, implicit bias, and structural racism?
Well, first and foremost, the way the question is posed, so eradicating the racism, there's a part of that question that sounds like there's a lot of racism within the department. And all I can say, I've been working there quite a long time, for 14 years. And so at this point, what's built into the system with the negotiated settlement agreement, you do checks and balances. And because OPD looks like they're going to get out of the NSA, the role of the Inspector General should be to ensure that the department maintains everything that's been established to create equity within the system. And there are ways to do that. There are vehicle stops. You can actually conduct audits to see if, in fact, people are being treated fairly. So there's vehicle, pedestrian stops, bicycle stops. So you want to make sure across the board, everybody is being treated equally and they're being stopped for the same reasons. They actually collect a lot of data on that, right? Was there probable cause, reasonable suspicion? The state of California recently has even included within that more information to be provided, perceived race, was something collected, was the person handcuffed, searched, all of these things. So you have all these categories. So you want to conduct audits to make sure things look normal. What is normal? The numbers will tell you, the data will tell you what's probably normal. And so if you can have the data, then you can do something where you can look for outliers. So there's that. There's also the department has put in place as an early warning system. Early warning system, now we're going to talk about each police officer's performance. So they're collecting data on whether it's sick leave, it's how many uses of force, how many complaints. So there's about maybe 13, there's probably more dimensions than that that's collected. Conducting audits on that and actually conducting an audit to see how OPD itself utilizes it to make sure are able to, if they detect an officer, what criteria OPD uses to detect racism. So OPD does have meetings, risk management meetings. So for me, the policy would be to make sure, like when it comes to uses of force, misconduct, vehicle stops, any of those type of discretionary stops by the officers, to make sure we're auditing that to see if there's any patterns or trends that should be looked at. And using that data, you got to have data for this stuff, because racism, as we all know, is not as easy to actually say somebody's racist. Anyone can make that allegation, but having the data, most people don't walk around with the cameras on all the time to know when they're going to be approached by a policeman, and that this whole thing needs to be reported. And when they are approached, that whole incident might be one occurrence. This person is approached by that one particular police officer. Person may have a feeling, but to show someone's racist is very hard with one allegation. To say this person is racist, oh, they pulled me over because my headlight was out. Well, I don't know if it'll even be documented as racism. Your headlight was out and that's illegal. But we can use the data that has been established because of the negotiated settlement agreement. And within those tasks, that's where you'll have the power to figure out under the charter, as the charter reads, what you're able to do. So those are the policies I'll be adopting, making sure those tasks in which I can look at, the Inspector General can look at annually to make sure the department is maintaining a level of excellence and detecting officers that may be racist. So that's through a lot of stops, interaction with the public, through those complaints. Is everyone getting a response? Are there credibility assessments, and are they being taken seriously too when they do testify? So.
Do we have any follow-up questions from the commissioners?
I have a slight follow-up with Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
You talked a lot about data, and a lot of what could be revealed is through data. And then and I don't want to mischaracterize your answer, but you said part of the question assumes there is a lot of racism in the department. Would you care to expand on that, whether or not you believe that is a starting point, though, and an important starting point to assume there is at least implicit bias, and therefore racism is an ingredient that might permeate the department in ways that impact outcomes with the community engagement.
Well, I would like to talk about that because there is the perceived and there's the actual. And so with the department, one way of looking at it for me has been ever since Ms. I think her first name is Jennifer Eberhardt with Stanford came, and she really had a lot of data, like thousands and thousands, much data, right? So when the question was posed to me, like, to eradicate racism, that tells me there is some group of people that says that the department, there is racism there. I think on an individual level, because the average lifespan of an officer could be maybe 5 years or less. So each time someone is hired, they bring with them their values and mores. So it might be. But on a large scale, to say like it's systemic racism, that has yet to be proved. And I am one that I like data. And I did like what Stanford did. And they were able to, with a group of students, look at thousands and thousands of video and words and things like that. And what they came out of, they did see that African Americans, they were being handcuffed more often than whites. And I appreciated that because that's the kind of work I wish that I could do, like thousands and thousands, and that African Americans, they were being spoken to differently, the words used during those interactions. And so I say to that, what does that mean? What does that mean when that happens? Is it that the person's racist, or is it that it is implicit bias? Something is going on. And yes, I agree with you, but as an auditor, you have to stay neutral in a sense that, no, I can't see everyone as racist, but I will let the data speak to me that something is going on. And I like to try to maintain that in all the work that I do. When it starts going, you start at 100 and then the data, it's now telling me that there is an issue. That's where we will be going, that yes, you are treating this group differently than you treat another one. But it's just the way the question, like looking at the department, all the work that's been done, as it is racist, it's hard for me to, there's a lot of good people in the police department, and there are some people that are racist, but we have to try to prove that part, like who are these people? We haven't been able, we can say some of their tactics may be unbalanced. And I think with Ms. Eberhardt, by having thousands and thousands of the data, yes, I can agree that yes, there's different treatment for African Americans, and that what she was able to prove, at least to show from her research and the treatment. So when the question was posed here, it's making me feel like, is that what the commission is making up the questions? That's all I was trying to get at. Like, is this how we see as the police commission, the Oakland Police Department? So that's all I was really speaking on, just because the questions were posed that way. And for me, as a neutral person, I don't think of it in cases of eradicating something that I don't know to be true as an auditor today.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I can go to the third question. Okay, and this is going to go to Mr. Muir first. What do you think the IG's role is as it relates to building community?
Thank you. So I guess to share a little bit about myself. When I was growing up in Oakland, I spent a lot of time working in an organization called the Lil Bobby Hutton Literacy Campaign. And it was a community tool for teaching kids how to read, essentially. I'd spend weekends there. And there were a lot of former community leaders there who had named it in the likeness of Lil Bobby Hutton, who had been killed by members of the Oakland Police Department in quite disputed circumstances. And I think that what resonated for me most as I spent time listening to those conversations was that there was a real sense of being terrified at the prospect of being killed by a police officer, and people who are sitting around talking about friends who have been killed by police officers. And I think that when we look at Oakland, we can see that there's a city with a long history of police violence that's been notorious in the American conversation. And that certainly tremendous steps have been made in the last 20 years. I mean, I'd say, yeah, 10, 15, 20 years. However, those communities are still there. The ones who had their friends killed, or the ones who taught their kids how to avoid the police. And I think that that's where civilian oversight comes into play. It's how it's come into play across America, is that we need to have robust police oversight for communities to feel as though there's someone who will take them seriously and take that fear seriously. So with the Inspector General's office, I've heard many of the concerns about the extent of the power of the Police Commission and the Inspector General, that role itself. However, I think that the more robust our police oversight, the more we can safely say that there's an attempt to create public safety in the hearts of the people who are scared of the police. And so I think that this is a tremendously important milestone in the history of Oakland, and hopefully signifies a closure in the history of certain actions by members of the department. Thank you.
Same question to Ms. Johnson. What do you think the IG's role is as it relates to building community?
I think it's very important. It's an opportunity for the Inspector General to go out and educate the community as to what we are able to do and to actually present audits. I think when I look at building community, I look at going to some of the National Crime Prevention Council meetings, also around to local colleges, and the newsletters, putting things on the website, and meeting with some of the community groups like the Police Accountability Coalition for a Safer Oakland, Latino Task Force. There's quite a few, but I really like that part of it because it at that point that you get an opportunity to see what the community thinks about the work you're doing, what would they like to see. So I would really love that part, actually. And I think the Inspector General and staff it would be wonderful to go and hear the public and see what they think about the work that's being done and what are their expectations as it relates to the charter. I'm big on the charter because the charter really, it has invisible lines right now, but once the Inspector General gets started, they'll all come to light what those lines really are. But it's more important to me that the people understand that we're working hard to make sure what they what they anticipated. It's something is it possible? If not, then I have an opportunity to explain, what could be limiting in the charter. So Inspector General, going out into the community, building community, really important because the people of Oakland put it on the charter, and that resonates with me. And I think it's important for them to, once they see it happening, to know what's going on. Is it what they thought it would be? And if not, what's precluding our office from doing what they wanted us to do. And after they see how it's working, if it's not to their benefit, it would be up to them to do an initiative or referendum to make it work the way they anticipated, because things don't always look the way. Writing is one thing, but executing it could be something different. But I think it's important that the IG builds community, especially starting out to answer all questions and the reports, going out there and actually giving an outline of how it turned out. What did we audit? What does that look like? Did we have to make recommendations and having questions answered? I would love that part of the job, actually.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Phillips, what do you think the IG's role is as it relates to building community?
I would definitely say that it starts right at home. The Oakland Police Commission in and of itself is in a makeup of individual individuals who are a part of the community, nonprofit organizations, people who are civic leaders and religious leaders, that's right there. The communication between the Office of the Inspector General as well as the Oakland Police Commission in and of itself, that conversation should start there. They have a wealth of knowledge as to what has been said and told during the process to put the Inspector General in the charter. I think that individual and that conversation should start right there. And then there needs to be communication with City Council, because those are the individuals who are also voice of reasons for those constituents in their area. With that, we need to start bridging the gap and start going out there, being very visible. One thing I try to pride myself in is being in a position to positively affect change in a way that individuals understand. Utilizing that education, utilizing self-trauma and things that we've gone through so that individuals know that we can bridge the gap. We understand in the community that you are dealing with certain traumas that are systemic to specific areas, whether it is an area that is of low socioeconomic status, an area that is highly concentrated with racial disparities. Getting on the ground, talking to those people in a vernacular that they truly understand, not talking at them, but letting them know that they can be a part of this fluid process. Yes, this is a very new office. This is something that can be an amazing addition to the Oakland community, but we have to understand that that is a huge feat for anybody who is named as the first Inspector General for the Oakland Police Commission. This is a lot of information that we need to provide, not only to the stakeholders in the community, but everybody on the ground. And we have to get a clear strategic plan as to how to do that. Invite those individuals to speak to us, as well as meeting them on their own terms, whether that means talking to individuals at universities, talking to individuals at high schools, going to churches, getting everybody involved in the process, so that police oversight is a positive and unified evaluation of what we can do as a community. We can be a pillar and an example for the rest of the nation to show not only do we all have different areas that we are responsible for, but we also all have the same vision in mind to continue the positive progress that has been instilled by the National Settlement Agreement as it nears its end. The Inspector General for the Oakland Police Commission will be a part of the process to continue on and push for that positive change through accountability, equity, integrity, and fair, firm, and impartial reviews of what that looks like, so that we can not only speak for the community, but also engage in a way that we understand and the community understands that Oakland Police Department needs to be held accountable, educated, and understood, so that we can regain trust and legitimacy in the Oakland community. Thank you.
Are there any follow-up questions to the questions I just asked the candidates?
I don't have any, Commissioner Peterson. Did you or Commissioner Malele?
I have none.
Okay.
Shall I move forward then?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. So we are just about at the end of our forum, and I have a very interesting question. And the prompt is, why should you be Oakland's first Inspector General? Ms. Johnson, you'll be first, Mr. Mack second, and Ms. Phillips last.
Okay, well, I should be the first Inspector General because I'm able to be up and running in a period of time. I really understand the negotiated settlement agreement. I know what it takes, and I actually have relationships. I have relationships within the police department as far as knowing how to get the data, who to speak with. I've worked with them quite a long time. I understand the culture. I'm also from the community. I am Oakland. I was born in San Francisco, but I was raised in Oakland from 7 on up. And so I understand that I frequent Oakland all the time. I am Oakland. And I actually love what I do. This would be something that really is meaningful for me. I am that person. I'm into policies, procedures, practices, into the numbers, and actually putting out good work and getting to actually helping an organization to meet its objectives. I believe in the whole system, the whole auditing thing, and it is a tool that benefits the community. And I'm able to share all my wisdom and knowledge with the staff and to help them go forward, learning something from me and putting out great reports and feeling good about the work we do. So I think for me, I'm Oakland. I am the community. I'm the Oakland Police Department. I'm the NSA, all in one package. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going in. Why should you be first Inspector General? Mr. Muir?
Thank you very much. So for me as a candidate, and I've already expressed this to the commission, I think there are 3 values that are most important in terms of my priority in this potential role. First is understanding culture. That means, as I was speaking to before, talking to as many people as possible who have been around the Oakland Police Department to try to get a clear understanding of what the culture is, what can change, how it can change for the best, and who's going to be able to do that most effectively without the auspice of saying it, well, it has to be the chief of police or it has to be the officers on the street, but building a collective effort with that understanding of culture. Number 2, understanding data. I think that in policing, we talk about data a lot of the time. In New York, it's a big part of the conversation. I think that good data is quite distinct from just a data itself. The Oakland project you were referring to before with the audio clips from body cam, you were able to see how different officers treated people of different races. It's an excellent example. However, I think that even the documentation of stop and frisk is an example of one that has fallen short, where when you're not really looking at the incentives of the officers at the moment they're inputting that data, and if you're not really looking at that moment where you decide what someone's race is, whether there was probable cause, whether force was used, and defining that in the moment, I think the data can be less useful and gets lost in terms of the reports that are put out by the police departments that are required to put out that data. Number 3, community engagement. As Inspector General, I would ensure that the press had a regular understanding of what the priorities of the Inspector General's office were. I'd make myself very available to the community to speak ad nauseum. I love talking about policing. I love talking about police oversight, and I would want to hear from you and be able to regurgitate the vision of what policing in Oakland needs to look like back to the press early and often. For me personally, I told you a little bit about tutoring and my experiences in Oakland there. I was at the same party the night as Oscar Grant, the night he was killed. And, I think back to the night in Oakland when I went to the Grand Lake Theater and I sat and I watched Fruitvale Station, as I'm sure many of you did. And that moment, it wasn't when he was killed in the movie, it was the moment when everyone sat in the theater afterwards, silent, and just people were crying, just crying and sitting there silently. And there was a somber sense of, well, this is it. Here we are, the people of Oakland, sitting in the sad theater. And for me, in terms of my journey, going to college and studying the Riders case, moving to Colorado, befriending the person who mostly ended solitary confinement there and who's been a great mentor to me, and then coming to the CCRB in New York and really understanding the craft of investigations, the craft that it's like woodworking or boiler making. It's something that you master as a tool for understanding facts and reasoning, how to come to a conclusion about an incident that took place, and then the political advising as well. I would say those are all things that make me a good candidate, but what makes me, I think, a great candidate is that my heart is in this. I love the city. I was raised here. I went to school here. I made my friends here. I formed my identity here, and I always come back home. It always will be my home. So I respectfully would like to offer myself in service of the city of Oakland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muir. And last but certainly not least, Ms. Phillips. Why should you be the first Inspector General for the city of Oakland?
First and foremost, I want to humbly say I appreciate the opportunity of being a part of this panel. These candidates are extremely well-versed. They have great backgrounds. I would never take anything away from anyone. As the Deputy Inspector General currently for the City of Baltimore's investigative unit, I come with a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, and no, I am not from Oakland. However, I am from an urban mecca that is currently under a federal consent decree. Our office in Baltimore City not only deals with fraud, waste, abuse, and misconduct for all city agencies, but we also have an MOU with the Baltimore City Police Department. I'm very, very, very much an advocate for positive social change. I am very much firmly planted in education, research, tools, measures. I think data is extremely, extremely important. That's one way that we can help to justify policy implementation. But one thing I am very much also is an innovator. I have vision. I come from somewhere outside of Oakland. I have a fresh pair of eyes. I am not immersed in the culture. However, I fully understand that there is a need. I can come in there, hit the ground running. I've built and helped build the Inspector General's office that is very successful in the city of Baltimore. When I was brought on, the Inspector General that is currently for the city of Baltimore just was appointed in January. I was hired in May. I came from a special agent in investigations all the way up to the Deputy Inspector General. One thing I can do is have a conversation with anyone from any social background and social milieu and be able to make them feel comfortable. I think that's very important. We want to not only manage the data, but we also want to manage the people, those partnerships with the community. You have to be able to resonate with individuals, get on their level, and to help them to understand that not only are you here as a catalyst, but you're here as a agent of change, to utilize the information that you have to help the City of Oakland's Police Department to continue to move forward in a positive light. So we need to understand that as people and as a person. I fully understand I can hit the ground running. I can do what I need to do, have those great conversations with individuals and have those difficult conversations with individuals. You have to be firmly planted in what you believe in and understand that, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and let people know that there is accountability, measures, and integrity in what we do as public servants. I believe in black and white. Right is right, wrong is wrong, regardless of what color, gender, social background, or creed that you have. There has to be accountability and there has to be tools to measure that. Instilling that in the city of Oakland as the Police Commission's first Inspector General is something that I can definitely do, something that I value, and something I'm wholeheartedly excited and hopefully will be able to do.
Thank you very much, Ms. Phillips. So now we've come to that point where we are almost to the end and we are finishing up early. I would like to ask the candidates if they have any parting words, closing comments, words of wisdom. I am absolutely pleased about this forum and the participation and the quality responses that we have heard. And I know I'm not alone. And if you feel like you have already given that in your commentary about being the first Inspector General, do not feel like you must respond. I just want to allow us to hear from you again and we're ending early even if everybody speaks. So we're going to recalibrate the timer for 3 minutes. You don't have to take it all. And you all can go in any order you like. Actually, maybe I should call on Mr. Muir, kind of take things out of order, and then we'll go with Ms. Johnson, and then Ms. Phillips, you can close it out. How about that? Excellent.
Great.
You've got the floor.
Well, first of all, I think one thing that I haven't focused on so much is the importance of making sure that law enforcement buys into the proposed policies. And I look forward to speaking with the department regarding those policies and figuring out where there's common ground. I think that in our conversations around policing in America, and I know that's true in Oakland, one of the things that I think is often lost is that there's in my experience, interacting with members of police unions, with the officers themselves, and having really candid conversations there, that there's a lot of common ground in terms of when we have brutal incidents, when we have scandals, that nobody's happy, and that immediately makes it clear to everyone that something needs to change. And I found that this was particularly useful in ending, almost nearly ending, there's a couple inmates left, but ending solitary confinement in Colorado, where they really focused on officer safety first and foremost, and that was actually a way to be able to show the many studies which show when you put a prisoner into solitary confinement, that they're more likely to be violent toward a corrections officer in that case. And I think there are many parallels with the story of broken windows policing. Essentially, broken windows policing, I believe, has been a short-term approach to lowering crime statistics when it does long-term harm to the communities that are there. And so I hope that that's something that can be straddled, that you can both work with the police officers, with their unions, with the department itself to address their concerns, and also understand that there needs to be a fundamentally new look into what policing in America is, and certainly in Oakland as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muir. Ms. Johnson?
I'm actually going to pass. Thank you. I think I've said enough.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Certainly. Ms. Phillips?
I will go ahead and close in saying that in this day and age, social justice is spearheading what 21st century policing is starting to look like. There are young people who feel empowered with a voice and want to utilize that to affect change. The Inspector General, as well as the Oakland Police Department and the Oakland Police Commission, I think, needs to work together in order to show and express how that voice they have can affect positive change in a nonviolent way so that we can all move Oakland forward. Being a African-American female and growing up in an urban city plagued with crime is very real. There is trauma that moves with us every single day, and that's something that cannot be ignored. Police officers see trauma too. So there is a bridge, a gap, something that we can see that we both community as well as police departments deal with on a regular basis. We can talk to that, we can speak to that. That's something that we need to utilize, take a hold of it and make it a positive, educate, heal, and move everyone forward. Living in it, understanding it, and helping to bring that education from many facets of my life can help to move Oakland forward in a positive way, in a positive light. And I think that that's one thing that needs to be extremely, extremely focused on for the new building of this amazing office, regardless of who the candidate is that is elected for this position. It will be tremendous. And with a police commission that is empowered for social change, equity, and integrity in the work that they do, I think it is something that is undeniable and it should be modeled nationwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Phillips. So that, with these final parting words, we will conclude our forum. Again, what you can expect is that we will cover the general progress of the ad hoc's efforts in our commission meeting tomorrow. We'll then work as an ad hoc to review and consolidate our notes, ready to present to the full commission for discussion sometime in November before making a final decision and offering the position. I am pleased to have been joined by the full ad hoc, Commissioners Malele and Peterson. I hope that you enjoyed your evening with us as well, getting to know the best and brightest candidates for the first Inspector General for the Police Commission inside the City of Oakland. Commissioners Malele and Peterson, do you have any additional comments to make?
I would just say that it's been an honor to serve on this ad hoc and to meet all of the candidates and certainly to be a part of this final process. You all have done the process well. Thank you so much for your participation. And we will certainly be getting back to you.
Thank you.
I will echo that. This has been an honor. It's been wonderful to meet you all and to have all of these conversations and to be a part of this process, this historic process. So thank you again.
Outstanding. And of course, we want to give a shout out to our Chief of Staff, Rania Adwan, who has managed this process flawlessly for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You all will be hearing from us, and a tape of this forum will be uploaded so that many, many more people can tune in and begin to correlate their thoughts about who should be the next or the first Inspector General for the Police Commission. Everyone, good night, be safe.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank
Good night.
you.
Thank you.